What's up, folks? Mike for CMCC Builds here with the second build in our Optimizing Critical Role series. Fjord Stone, the half-orc Hexadin, played by the CEO himself, Travis Willingham. If you haven't seen the previous videos in this series, I suggest you at least check out the intro video, if not both the intro and Yasha video, to get a clear understanding of what we're trying to accomplish here. Before we jump in, I wanted to welcome all the new viewers, and especially the new subscribers. The Yasha video really blew up fast, which was a lot of fun to see. I hope you all enjoyed it. For anyone new here, maybe check out my Iron Man video for a look at the bulk of what I do on this channel. It's my longest video, but I think it's probably my best. After today's video, I'm going to do maybe one more from this series before hopping back over into the fictional character builds with a couple more superhero videos before returning to this series. There are some big summer blockbusters on the way, so that should tip you off to who might be in the queue in the coming weeks and months. Back to Fjord, what we have here is a classic 5e power build, the multi-classed Hexblade and Paladin. There are a bunch of different ways to build this type of character and to do so effectively. You can focus on Paladin levels and dipping as little as 1 level in Hexblade so you can focus on Charisma. You can do the opposite and focus primarily on Hexblade and dip only 2 levels in Paladin for smites and even heavy armor. As we did with Yasha, the goal isn't to necessarily optimize towards straight power or show how the cast was wrong and I'm right. We still must consider the character concept, which will guide our decisions. So with that, let's go ahead and Eldritch Blast our way into the build. For the racial selection, we will of course stick with half-orc. I'm not exactly sure why Travis decided to pick half-orc. Most of his choices, specifically ability score choices, seem to indicate to me that he, like most of the Critical Role cast, wanted to veer as far away from his previous character as possible. A low strength, moderately high intelligence, very high charisma character. So why the half-orc choice? Perhaps to play against type? I'm honestly not sure. If you have some insight into that decision, please let me know and let everyone else know in the comments. Prior to Tasha's, half-orcs are not a particularly great choice for Hexadins. Half-elves, however, are excellent choices because of the +2 to charisma and +1 in 2 different stats. I'm assuming the 3 half-elves in Campaign 1 have deterred anyone in the cast from choosing that race for the foreseeable future. But post-Tasha's, we now have the option to put those racial ASI, ability score increases or improvements, in whichever stats we want, which does help out with this build a decent amount. But the impact here will certainly be less than what we saw with Yasha, who lost out on an entire ASI with her racial choice. I'll talk more about where we're going to put those racial score improvements when we go over the ability score selections. There were no changes to this race in the latest Monsters of the Multiverse book, since half-orcs are a player's handbook race, so all the racial traits will remain the same. Dark Vision, Menacing, which gives proficiency in the Intimidation skill, Relentless Endurance, which allows half-orcs to drop to 1 hit point instead of 0 once per long rest, and Savage Attacks, which is the equivalent of the Barbarian's Brutal Critical feature, allowing you to roll 1 additional die on a critical. Again, this is not a good ability. Fortunately, it's not a level 9 ability here, so it's not quite that bad. Just not one of the better racial abilities in the game by any stretch. For the ability scores, once again we're going with rolled stats, and here Travis's rolls present a bit of an issue. He rolled an 18, 17, 14, awesome, then an 11, 9, and 7. Not so awesome. With a Hexadin, we need several stats, despite one of the main draws of Hexblade being the feature Hex Warrior, which allows you to use Charisma for attacks and damage. Along with Charisma, we'll of course need Constitution like every build, but we also need a 13 in Strength so we can multi-class into Paladin, and unless we invest in Strength, which we won't for both resource and player choice, Travis's unwillingness to play a high Strength character, we will not wear heavy armor with this build, so we need to invest in Dexterity to make full use of medium armor. That's 4 ability scores. Oh, we can't forget about Travis's desire to play a decently intelligent character. That's 5 ability scores. We have 3 good rolls. This is a problem and requires we sacrifice something, and since this series is called Optimizing Critical Role, I think you know what the first stat to go will be. To make this work, we have to put that 11 in Strength and use our racial ASI to bump that to a 13. Yes, I know that Matt functionally brushed this off by allowing the Wild Mother to boost Fjord's strength 2 points to a 13, but if we're building a character, we simply don't know if that's going to be the case. We're going to put the 14 in dexterity so that we can maximize the medium armor that Fjord wears. The 11 dex on Fjord was a killer, as 2 AC points makes a big difference, and as we'll see, it's actually 3 AC that Travis lost out on with his character choices. Constitution will be 17, and unlike Travis, we won't put that +1 racial ASI here. Yes, I know it's an odd number, but that's exactly what we want for this build. For intelligence, we'll have to put the 9 here. Sorry, Travis, 9 is okay. We can't have it all. In a party with Caleb and Bo's super high intelligence scores, a 14 intelligence is pretty much just wasted. Fjord can still be a fine leader, and a 9 intelligence isn't a bumbling fool, so I think Travis could RP Fjord in basically the same way without much issue, despite losing the 5 points to intelligence. Wisdom will be the dump stat for this character again with a 7. And we'll put the 18 in charisma and use the +1 racial ASI to bump that to a 19. Again, an odd number, but that works for our goals here. For background, we'll stick with Sailor, as this was a major storyline for Campaign 2. There is 0 flexibility here. This gives proficiency in athletics and perception skills, along with navigator's tools and water vehicles. For starting class, I considered recommending Paladin here. The only reason to go Paladin would be for the heavy armor proficiency it provides, and if we decided to stick with Travis's 11 in dexterity, this would be the path to take, as heavy armor bumps your max AC without a shield from 15 all the way up to 18. But with a 14 in dexterity, the disparity between heavy armor and medium armor is only 1 AC, which isn't worth the strength investment. So we'll stick with the more story-appropriate Warlock for the starting class. 5 levels gives us some choices to make. For the proficiencies, Deception and Investigation are fine choices. With a 9 intelligence, Investigation becomes a bit of a waste, especially with Bo and Caleb in the party, but none of the other skill choices are much better. Maybe Nature, as you can make the argument that a sailor should have a good understanding of weather and the outdoors, especially as it pertains to the sea, but I'm happy with Investigation. For the patron, I'm obviously going with Hexblade, which gives some additional spells, some excellent ones, along with Hexblade's Curse and Hex Warrior. At level 2, Warlocks get invocations, and here we're going to make a change. For his invocations, Travis took Agonizing Blast, which is an absolutely necessary pickup for any character using Eldritch Blast, which Travis did a lot. But he also took Mask of Many Faces, which allows for unlimited castings of Disguise Self. I get the RP reasons for this, and we will get this spell and some free castings down the road, but for the second invocation, I'm going to take Repelling Blast. For someone who used Eldritch Blast as much as Travis did, not having this excellent invocation just unnecessarily nerfed his combat right out of the gate. And if you lean toward RP selections, just ask yourself, which spell did Travis cast more, Eldritch Blast or Disguise Self? We'll give precedence to the most used spell in this case, and again, we're not forgetting about Disguise Self. At level 3, we'll stick with Pact of the Blade, which will unlock some necessary invocations, including Thirsting Blade, which we'll take just like Travis. This gives 2 attacks per turn with a pact weapon. We will eventually trade this ability out for another one. For the level 4 ASI, once again, Travis made a great selection with Warcaster, which allows Fjord to equip the shield, which he will, along with the best half-plate available. We'll assume the Mariner's Breastplate. We'll get into spells in a second because Travis made a couple of great choices that he almost never used, so I want to highlight those, especially since one ties directly into the Warcaster feat. For the spell selection, Travis did a great job with his early choices. Cantrips, Eldritch Blast, and Minor Illusion are both excellent picks at this point. Travis then took Booming Blade, which I will too. Travis cast this 3 times in the campaign, and I can't remember a single use, except in the Vox Machina vs. Mighty 9 one-shot. Every single opportunity attack at this point in Campaign 2 that Fjord got should have been used with this spell, literally 100%. Warcaster allows you to cast spells with your opportunity attack, and as the enemy is moving away, Booming Blade is the obvious choice, as it all but guarantees you'll get the rider damage, which at level 5 totals 3d8 damage beyond your weapon. And for spells, Travis took Hex, Wrathful Smite, Armor of Agathis, Witch Bolt, Crown of Madness, Hunger of Hadar, and Blink. Some of these are great choices, and some are downright awful picks that either did nothing or weren't used. Hex is a fine pick. Wrathful Smite and Armor of Agathis are both great choices. Travis cast Wrathful Smite 1 time in the entire campaign. 1 time. Wrathful Smite is an excellent spell. He should have been casting this nearly once per combat, but it doesn't upcast, so I understand the lack of use at higher levels. But we'll rectify this with Paladin levels. We'll also take Shield. If you cast spells, you need Shield. Again, I assume the lack of lower level spell slots stopped Travis from taking this, which is why multi-classing Warlock helps so much on builds like this. For second level spells, I would take spells that upcast well. Hold Person seems to fit both thematically and from a power perspective. With a third level slot, it can be cast on 2 enemies, greatly increasing the odds of hitting at least 1 person. And for the 3rd level spells, Travis took Blink. I'd take Summon Shadow Spawn here. It's a solid summon spell, and Travis loves summoning demons during Campaign 2. This would have worked great at low tier 2 play. It's at this point I would multi-class out of Warlock and into Paladin for 2 levels. I know, Travis couldn't multi-class for story reasons until level 12. Here's the thing. Paladins don't take their oath until level 3. I have absolutely zero doubt that Travis and Matt would make this work from a story perspective, with Fjord expanding his powers in other ways before eventually taking his oath to the Wild Mother much later with a 3rd level in Paladin. Taking 2 levels gives us so much. First, we get Divine Smite, and that's awesome. We have some high level slots to smite with, and those come back on short rests. And we get 1st level spell slots, which are fantastic with Wrathful Smite and especially Shield. Fjord's power level just went through the roof, and it opens the door for a better RP opportunity as Fjord will take his oath at level 3 Paladin at the exact time in the story when he devotes himself to the Wild Mother. So instead of having that fantastic story arc of Fjord transforming physically with the Wild Mother's blessings and then waiting multiple levels before actually taking an oath, this way it would happen right away, and he would be a full-fledged Paladin of the Wild Mother. Personally, it works better for me this way, from both an optimization and story perspective. With the fighting style, take Dueling since Fjord uses the Falchion, and with the 5 Paladin spells, prepare Bless, Command, Compel Duel, Cure Wounds, Thunderous Smite, and Wrathful Smite. No, that's not a mistake, because right now we're going to go back into Warlock for 3 more levels. Fjord gets another Invocation at this point, and Travis took Gift of the Depths, which sounds great coming from Uk'otoa, but he already got the Boon of Uk'otoa, and with Mariner's Armor, this is largely a waste. Relentless Hex, which Travis takes later, works fine instead. Eldritch Smite is a strong pickup that I'll put on the sideline for now since we have Divine Smite through Paladin. Eldritch Smite knocks enemies prone, so it has its advantages, but it's probably not worth the Invocation slot right now. For the ASI feat, Travis bumped Charisma to 20, and I'll do the same, but since Fjord has a 19 Charisma with this build, we can take a half feat here. Shadow Touched isn't as strong as Fey Touched, but it's more fitting for the Fjord character. This maxes Fjord's Charisma, gives the Invisibility spell for free, which is right in line with the character, and we can select another spell from the Illusion or Necromancy schools. Here we gotta take, you guessed it, Disguise Self. That gives a free casting and allows it to be cast with a spell slot after that. If this is too late to get that spell for your taste, you could always take it earlier with a Warlock slot and then switch it out when you pick up this feat. For the additional spells, drop Wrathful Smite and take Counterspell, Hypnotic Pattern, maybe the best 3rd level spell, and Travis only casts this once in campaign, Shadow of Moil, and Dimension Door. We will not take Summon Greater Demon because we already have a summon spell, Thunderstep because Dimension Door is just better, but Thunderstep does damage and is a fine selection. Hunger of Hadar and Major Image are okay picks, but weaker than the other choices. At this point, Fjord has fully embraced the Wild Mother through Caduceus' guidance, and will go back into Paladin for 4 more levels to Paladin 6. The Paladin level 6 ability, Aura of Protection, is one of the best class features in the entire game apart from spellcasting, so getting this ability ASAP makes a ton of sense. Add to that the story reasons for Fjord to really dive into Paladin levels at this point, as he has devoted himself to the Wild Mother and her protective aura fits perfectly with the Paladin aura, and this just works for me. At Paladin 3, Paladins get their Sacred Oath, and in one of the most disappointing moments of Campaign 2 for me, Travis and Matt decided to homebrew an oath for Fjord. Fjord is a hero of the Wild Mother. The Wild Mother is the goddess of the wilderness and the sea. There is already an oath devoted to nature, and that is the Oath of the Ancients. Yes, it's more forest and land-based nature instead of the ocean, but again, the Wild Mother is the goddess of the wilderness. Her green power has infused Fjord, even changing the visuals of his spells and hexes into a greenish color. The ancient paladins are often called Green Knights. This was such a perfect fit. I was shocked when they decided against it for a homebrew subclass. For the ASIR feat, go with Resilient Constitution, bumping Con to 18 and making Fjord's concentration all but unbreakable with this feat. The 18 Con and Warcaster. For Paladin spells, prepare Aid, Fine Steed because he's a Paladin, and Lesser Restoration. All strong spells. Oath of the Ancients gives Fjord Ensnaring Strike, Speak with Animals, and that includes any animals that live in the sea. Misty Step, which is a big reason I went with Shadow Touched instead of Fey Touched, and Moonbeam, which I would have loved to see Fjord use in campaign, as the Wild Mother's light would be a perfect contrast to Uk'otoa's darkness. With 6 levels in Paladin, they of course get the amazing Aura of Protection that gives a +5 to anyone's save in the aura, including Fjord, and extra attack. Since we already have Thirsting Blade, we'll have to make some changes as we go back into Warlock for the final 2 levels. The big loss here for this version of the character is that we don't get Life Drinker if the campaign ends at 16, and that is tough, but Aura of Protection is better than the big damage bump that Life Drinker gives. Don't get me wrong, Life Drinker is a very good invocation and a must grab for any Pact of the Blade Warlock, but getting your Aura for 6 levels or Life Drinker for 2 levels, as Travis could have taken this at character level 15, is an easy choice for me. It does blow my mind that he decided not to go with this invocation, and I have no idea why, since it seems an obvious pick at Warlock 12. For invocations, I like Devil Sight. You could argue this should come earlier as it fits well as one of Ukatoa's gifts. For the final invocation, Travis took Sculptor of Flesh, which gives Fjord the Polymorph spell, and Travis never once cast the spell. And with 2 big polymorph casters in Caleb and Jester, this seems like a wasted invocation. Tomb of Leviticus, Ascendant Step, Trickster's Escape, and many others are excellent choices. But here, I'll take Eldritch Smite for those times when you need to knock an enemy prone and do a ton of damage. This should be used over Divine Smite in those cases. For spells, drop Hex, as there is really no reason to concentrate on this spell at this point, and take Banishing Smite and Far Step like Travis did, but instead of Enervation, take Synaptic Static, which is probably the best 5th level spell available to Warlocks. It does okay damage, but for any creatures that fail their save, it absolutely wrecks their attack rolls, ability checks, and con saves for concentration. Fjord also gets an additional cantrip, and I don't think Travis actually ever took or used this 4th cantrip. I'll suggest taking Green Flame Blade for those opportunities where 2 enemies are bunched together, but also because it just fits with the visual themes of the Wild Mother. So there we have it. Let's compare the 2 builds. Unlike the Yasha build, this one comes with a few more trade-offs, but I obviously think those trade-offs are well worth it. The 3 big negatives are the loss of the Life Drinker invocation, which Travis actually didn't ever take, so it's not really a trade-off, I guess. And by not hitting level 11 in Warlock, Fjord loses out on a 3rd Warlock spell slot, which is a big deal, and 6 level spells through Mystic Arcanum. None of these are minor, but having these abilities doesn't outweigh the benefit of having low-level spell slots early to cast Shield and Wrathful Smite, 2nd level Paladin spells like Aid and Fine Steed for 7 levels of play, and of course the 6 levels of play with an Aura. Let's take a look at the defense of both builds. AC will always be 2 points higher because of the increase to Dex, but with Half Plate, that jumps to a 20 AC compared to a 17. And as a character that was often in melee, those 3 points of AC do matter quite a bit. And as for saves, there really is no comparison. Original Fjord with a Cloak of Protection had bonuses of 2, 1, 5, 3, 4, and 11 in Strength, Dex, Con, Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma. New Fjord, also with a Cloak of Protection, has saving throws of 7, 8, 15, 5, 9, and 16, which is kind of insane. And not only that, characters like Yasha or Bo on the front lines would also have +5 to all of their saves if they're next to Fjord, which was often the case. All those times Yasha was mind controlled, Fjord could have helped her. And if Fjord is using Eldritch Blast on the back lines, he can help support casters like Caleb, Jester, and Caduceus with the Aura, protecting their concentration in the process. Hit points will be 2 higher with the new build because of the extra levels in Paladin instead of Warlock, until Travis took the Tough Feat, which bumps up the original version to more than 30 hit points. Resilient Con is still the better choice, as con saves are huge for a character like this. Travis went a few different directions with some other selections that I'll quickly address here. For feats, he took Mobile, which does work well with Booming Blade, but again, he never used that spell or this combo of hitting with Booming Blade and moving away without an opportunity attack. So it's not a particularly good pick for Travis's playstyle, but otherwise it would be a fine pick. For fighting style, Travis took Great Weapon Fighting, which makes no sense as Fjord uses a shield, and you can't use a weapon with 2 hands and use a shield. This was either a mistake on Matt's part or some homebrew that I missed. Offensively, much depends on the number of smites used. This build does have more spell slots available, but not as many back on short rest. So if we assume no uses of Divine Smite for simplicity's sake, Old Fjord did 20.9 damage per round without using Hexblade's Curse, while this new version does 24.1 damage. A minor bump, but a bump nonetheless. And don't forget, we can move creatures all around the battlefield and do a decent amount of damage with Eldritch Blast from range now, or use Booming Blade on opportunity attacks, which adds an additional, and I'm not kidding here, 31.175 damage for each opportunity attack. Fjord's single opportunity attack does more damage than either his melee or ranged attacks, which with 3 Eldritch Blasts are now doing 21.3 DPR. If you forget to use your abilities, then those abilities are effectively useless. Have a good day, folks.